Did you know that I wasn't the biggest fan of Kagurabachi when it launched? Admittedly, it wasn't really my cup of tea, and that was just based on the first handful of chapters. The funniest thing about this story and about my experience with it is that I completely turned back on my own opinion, which happens incredibly often. See, I wasn't concrete about Kagurabachi. I like certain elements of it, but I also disliked other elements very early on within the story, and I think a lot of people shared that same sentiment. There's just things within there that were kind of rough or a little bit bland or a little bit basic or this or that, and just didn't really sit well, and it wasn't enough to continue reading the story. However, I continued to read the story just to see how things would flesh out and how this, brand new story, I'd give it a proper chance, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I was wrong, and I'm okay to admit that. A story that I didn't put much stock or attention into has now become one of my most favorite over recent times. Something that I constantly look forward to every single week, and is becoming such a phenomenal read every single week. And while its overarching story, or the way it handles characters, or even its abilities aren't necessarily unique, the intention, the action, and the idea of things being brought forward is so incredibly enticing. I've talked about this a lot, but I think intent is a very difficult thing to feel within manga. That intent is basically what the author is trying to do, what they're trying to get across, how they're trying to structure the chapter, or this moment, or this fight scene, or this look or appeal. I think Kagurabachi has such a beautiful intent that is so easy to see. I feel like I read a chapter and I can feel where the author is putting a lot of the intention and a lot of the focus and a lot of the build-up and the structure, and that just could be because they're young, because they're new to the industry, because this is one of their first stories, maybe because they're new to art as well, but for some reason it comes off thoughtful, it comes off engaging and energetic and filled with life. It feels like every single panel or double spread or action sequence has a very addicting purpose behind it. Of course, all of this stuff in general, in a normal sense, has purpose, has intent. The author is doing it with that idea, but for some reason, and I can't really explain why, Kagurabachi feels a lot more. It's like I can feel a lot more of the author's presence directly with how he structures this scene or how he visualizes this, and it kind of feels like a signature. Maybe it's because they reference a lot of modern movies, maybe because they reference a lot of things they like, maybe because they're inspired by a lot of things, who knows? Maybe I'm just delusional, but if by whatever reason you understand what I'm talking about, and I've somehow managed to explain this kind of clearly, you get my drift. You can see the potential, you can see the vision, right? I'm not just loony, and I feel like that has grown more and more over time. Like, it hasn't wavered, it hasn't disappeared. If anything, it's become more engaging, more thoughtful, more intentful, and every single chapter has these big sequences or chunks that just feel exactly how the author wants to interpret it. A lot of people still don't like this story, still won't give it a chance, still won't read past chapter 10. And look, I get it. Sword story might not be for you. The sprinkle of quote-unquote edge that it has might not be for you either. But I promise you, it's not the same story, nor does it have the same energy, nor does it even have the same intent. And it's not even for the sake of being edgy anymore, because you can clearly see purposeful edge, and then you can see a story that's just doing what it wants to do. I think there's a very, very small percentile of people that don't like this story for that reason, and that's okay. I think there's a larger percent of people that don't like this story because they just haven't read past chapter 10, and because they still think it's part of this meme association that happened for it. I'd like to reiterate, this story is not revolutionary, and anyone that reads it would most likely agree. So for the first half of this segment, if you're still stuck on this old school idea about Kagurabachi being garbage, chuck it out the window, give it a chance, read all of it. If you still think it's garbage when you catch up, you know what, all the more power to you. However, I'd like to think a good percentage of you would change your mind. Kagurabachi is a lot better than you think, and it's no longer being ran by memes. So it is cooking massively. It ain't going anywhere, and it's only going to get better. Therefore, now I want to talk about recent story events. This is a auction raid type of arc. You've seen a lot of similar ones before. This one's pretty small scale. It's not as open or massive as a raid or an auction would be normally, and that's perfectly okay. It's reduced down to family dynamics, and this raid being operated by a family, a very powerful one, an underground family. They are the ones in control of this auction, with a alternate dimension storehouse is controlled by one person, the father, the ringleader. He has a bunch of kids. All of them have special abilities. They're all kind of the same special ability, but with different somewhat alterations between them. Think of like a generational power, right? One of the kids is called Hakuri, and he's the kind of ugly duckling of the group, the weakling, the odd one out. He gets bullied a lot, he gets abused a lot of trauma, a lot of bad history, just a lot of negative, horrible things that either he's experienced or he's had to witness. And I kind of love how this is shown, because it's not something that you get a lot of. You get a small taste of it in a flashback that is incredibly valuable to the perception of Hakuri and how he views himself, how he views his family, how he views his father. And there's a level of value that completely changes everything. He is kind of a prisoner to this family, to his father, to himself, to his ideals and his feelings, and so much so that this has actually limited his ability, his usage. A lot of people thought that he didn't inherit any sort of power. It's actually because there's so much trauma there, it has blocked everything around him. So when he's able to kind of process that, get through it, everything changes. His mindset changes, his emotions change, his abilities change, and he kind of feels like a whole different person. Even if he's putting on a strong front, which you could argue is 100% the case because he is going up against his family still, it's something that has to be done. It's something that he agrees with doing, and it's something that he's willing to push forward through. It's a massive turning point for his life, and loosely, it's kind of dismantling your own trauma bit by bit. The stuff that has prisoned him, has shielded him, has corrupted him for all of his childhood is now unraveling very, very quickly, piece by piece. And I think a very beautiful thing about that is that it's not done by anybody else, it's done by him. And why Chihiro provides guidance, in a sense, not directly on how to fix things, but more so his intention, his energy to stop this auction provides a backbone for Hakuri to stand on. It's like this little bit of other perspective that he needed to really stand for himself. Chihiro has seen Hakuri as a person, as a human being, flesh and blood, something that Hakuri has never got from his own family. For those reasons and many more, Hakuri has become one of my favorite characters and most likely one of yours. And I hope he stays around, and I think he will. Technically, Hakuri doesn't really have anywhere else to go, so perfect addition. It would be a waste to take him out of the story, and honestly, I kind of want to see him grow alongside Chihiro. I think they'd make great companions to friendships, to family even. The auction itself, however, has me pretty worried because the whole intent behind it is to sell off one of the swords. It's a very powerful sword. It's one of the only ones that we've seen to be kind of like double or triple contained by something, and you don't really know what to expect. At the same time, Chihiro was going into this fight without his sword, so he was using Cloud Gauger, which was incredibly broken and basically on its final legs, but still very cool that it's utilized as its remnant. Easily this could have been done differently, of course, but seeing how resourceful Chihiro can be and even pushing that sword, that broken Cloud Gauger sword to its limits was incredible. You have pretty much the perfect battlefield here. This old dude isn't that strong. I don't expect him to put up crazy massive fights unless he just starts ripping things out. If anything, the value from this arc so far has basically reached its limit, and now we're kind of bringing things to a close. See, we got a bunch of smaller things within here that over time will become a lot bigger. For example, there was a stone that was introduced into the story. It was kind of artificially created to be Cloud Gauger. It had the same spirit energy within it, and it was used by one of the children. They got all of the abilities, basically, of Cloud Gauger. It was very detrimental. It ended up basically killing that child, but for a brief period of time, they were a pretty big monstrosity. That is most likely going to evolve. We also got to see for the first time one of the main villains of the story. The main sorcery group that was involved with Chihiro's father. What got him killed? What took his swords potentially? They have their fingers and eyes and ears basically all over these swords and on this auction as well. But they're not moving all too wild. They're not trying to play all their cards. If anything, they're taking a very massive, normal backseat to this situation. A lot of build-up, a lot of time is needed to go into them, to flesh them out, to make them these crazy, scary-like beings. If they are as strong as we think they are, then they're going to be a problem and they need a lot of time. Littered all between this arc. Incredible action, incredible character dialogue, the teleporting guy fighting one of the kids, that was beautiful. That one flame bone chick, always love her. I honestly hope she becomes part of Chihiro's squad, or at least if not officially, they kinda just work together. I love their dynamic and I love what all of these other characters bring to the table. There is a beautiful story unfolding here, and admittedly I was worried after Sojo because I didn't really know what would go on. I was impressed that such a character like him, such a villain, could be conceptualized so early and be so impactful, and could that be replicated? Was it a fluke? This is a new author that's very green to the industry. Could they continue to thrive? And if anything, they've proved it. This arc is proof that they're able to expand upon their horizons and not just try to replicate or do whatever Sojo was. We don't need to rattle those out every single arc. There's importance and value elsewhere, and I guess providing that type of balance is something that I was looking for, and I'm sold. I'm confident that this story is going to be incredibly massive. I think you give it 30, 50 more chapters and everyone will be reading this story. And as soon as you start to mention an anime for it, you're looking at easily the next big thing. Hands down, this could really be a huge deal, if you don't think it is already.